chiropractors were not considered essential workers, I'm forever a student. So I really thrive on learning someone's body of work.
When it comes to women, there aren't very many studies.
We're just beginning to really appreciate it.
Dr. Stephanie Estima. She's a total powerhouse in the world of women's health.
She's a doctor of chiropractic medicine. She has a special interest, though, in metabolism, body composition, functional neurology, and female physiology.
She also has a deep understanding of neuroscience, nutrition, exercise physiology, and biomechanics.
Dr. Stephanie is the host of Better with Dr. Stephanie, a top-rated podcast with over 7 million downloads.
When you're like 35, like mid to late 30s, we actually start to see progesterone steadily decline. It can really affect quality of life, what your energy levels and your sex drive.
We can't rely on the science all the time.
I'm so sorry to my first patient, but you are absolutely my guinea pig. This is where the fitness industry has really done us dirty. I'm totally going against these sort of marketing norms where it's like 10 pounds in 10 days. Just because you lift weights, it doesn't mean that you're going to bulk up.
Are you a coach or are you a clinician?
Dr. Stephanie, we are very delighted to have you on the Ready State podcast.
I am delighted to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Welcome, welcome. So I was lucky enough to be a guest on your amazing podcast a few months ago, and we were talking in the pre-roll about how—
My feelings aren't hurt. It's totally fine.
Yeah, we were talking in the pre-roll about how there have been a couple clips that have kind of gone crazy on Instagram, and you know, I just loved chatting with you and think you are just such an awesome podcaster. Kelly and I are lucky enough to go on a lot of podcasts, and I felt like I had such a great conversation with you. So I'm going to start this episode by saying thanks for having me on your podcast.
Oh, thank you.
And we're so excited to introduce our audience to you and your work as well.
Thank you.
Let me say that I feel such camaraderie with you. Classically trained provider, and then realizing that you can use that utility to do something else, that you can sort of expand into health, into sort of a greater understanding of opening a bigger door than potentially sort of one patient visit at a time.
Yeah, I feel that. I mean, I was in private practice for just shy of 20 years, and it was great. It was wonderful. I loved my patients, loved all the work that I was doing, and also maybe very similar to both of you, felt like I could be a better educator to more people that wasn't really necessarily restricted by geographical, location. And I love talking about all the things that we're going to talk about today. Like we were saying in the pre-chat, we're basically the same person. Just
one of the things,
same love for fitness and
Yes.
pain cave and all the things. So VO2 max and strength and
I love it.
hypertrophy, all the things. And I think that I'm sure we'll get into it, but the hill that I want to die on is really teaching women how to lean into strength and how to lean into their power, like literally, and also, how that translates into their mental grit and their mental capacity.
Well,
sorry, let me go.
All right.
Let me go. Okay, so before we get to all that, you hinted at it, but tell us a little bit more about your actual background and what you were doing. And then maybe more importantly, because one of the themes we talk about a lot on this podcast is transitions and how people manage those emotionally and, and everything that goes into major life transitions, of which we all have. So I'd love to hear about, your work as a chiropractor, and then what really drove you to want to make this transition to being an author and a podcaster and a champion of women and strength and all the amazing things you're doing now, and what that transition was like for you.
I'm sure it's easy. Just beginner's luck.
Yeah.
Hashtag best new artist. And I just want to frame everyone for that 20 years of working with people.
20
in the
years.
trenches.
I mean, just
That's
emphasize
so
that you were
amazing.
working one-on-one with clients for 20
Yeah.
years. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Take it away.
Yeah. So, so class of 2003, the Canadian Memorial Chiropractic College, very, very proud of the school that I went to and the education that I received. Have had just an never-ending love affair with the neuromusculoskeletal system. The way that I actually paid for my chiropractic school was I was a fitness instructor. So before class started, I was teaching step and aerobics and Tae Bo and strength training and body pump and all those things. And
Yes
that
to
was all I
Tae
paid
Bo.
for my tuition. Yeah, the Tae Bo. I remember those videos. They were the best. And I was in, as you were mentioning, got into practice certainly there's a lot of things that they don't teach you in school about running a business. Like I just sort of assumed like I'm just going to put the like, and then the patients will come. Had a wonderful awakening to that is absolutely not the case. I also had to learn about marketing, and I had to be HR, and I had to all the other things around business, but slowly and steadily grew my practice. And I had a couple of things that happened in the practice, professionally, and then I had a couple things personally that happened that sort of coincided all at the same time, and I really had to sort of reevaluate what I wanted to do. So professionally, I had this beautiful practice in downtown Toronto, and there was an unfortunate fire in the practice. There was a massage. We had massage therapists. We had athletic therapy. We had a whole bunch of different types of practitioners working out of the clinic. And one evening, massage therapist was sort of cleaning up and, put the towels or whatever in the dryer. And there was an electrical fire, no fault of her own. There was just an electrical fire. There was like some wires that had disconnected, and the entire clinic burnt down like to a
Wow.
Ugh.
crisp.
Oh my gosh.
So I had to scramble. I had to full patient roster. I had to sort of scramble to sort of find a place to just continue seeing patients, find a new place to renovate and rehab, all the things. And so I did that. I had found a temporary space. I was seeing patients. I found another place to lease. Was renovating that to have a rehab center, and like basically my dream clinic. And I was there for a couple of years, and we'd always run nutrition programs and fitness programs and squat challenges and March Madness. We'd always run these fun things all through the year. And this nutrition program in particular, I started really noticing a difference between the outcomes of my female patients and my male patients. So it was a ketogenic diet. So we were doing a higher fat, moderate protein, very low carbohydrate diet, and started noticing that, husband, especially when it was like a husband and wife couple, the guy would come in and he's like, I've like dropped 20 pounds. It's amazing. I feel great. Testosterone levels are, through the roof. I feel, like I did 10, 20 years ago. And, the wife, same environment, eating, same cues, same stimulus, same food, was maybe losing 1 or 2 pounds, felt terrible, was having carb cravings through the roof. Maybe we were starting to see some, aberrations in her thyroid. And so I started to become really curious around the difference between men and women in terms of when we apply a stimulus, how is that different? Started to change even just the chiropractic adjustments and the rehab that I was giving to women over the course of their cycle. So I started changing how much, for all the docs, like line of drive and how much velocity, like was it a high velocity amplitude thrust or was it like a soft, depending on where they were and how much estrogen and how much I thought that might be impacting ligaments and tendons. So long story short, the nutrition program, we put it online. I started having, again, the same kind of feedback that I was getting in the clinic where women were saying like, I don't understand what's happening. Like I'm doing this program with my husband and I'm getting okay results, but he's getting really fantastic results. And then I personally, at the same time that I was rebuilding this clinic, went through a divorce with very young children. So any breakup, if anyone's ever been through, any kind of breakup, that it's, devastating. It's even more devastating with young children. And so I just had to kind of sit back and say, okay, what is it that I really want to do? I felt like I was a decent educator. I felt like I really resonated with patients, but I felt like I was meant for more. And so I made a very difficult decision I made it in December of 2018, and then I ended up closing the clinic in 2019, April of 2019.
When
And
COVID hit, were you like, wow, okay, that was
I
a good
could
call?
not believe my luck. Yeah. Yeah. I was thanking my lucky stars because at the time chiropractors were not considered essential workers. So we would, I would have had
Canada had some
still paying rent,
strict
but not being able
lockdown.
to
You had
see
curfews
patients.
and a lot going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of crazy stuff there for sure. And then I took the summer off. So it was like May through, whatever it was, September. And I started a podcast later that year. So I actually launched it I think it was the last day or two of September, early October was the first episode that dropped. And it feeds a lot of things for me. Like I'm eternally curious. I really love to speak to people. Through the podcast, I've met, both of you. And it feeds I'm a student. I'm forever a student. So I really thrive on learning someone's body of work, learning about the perspectives that they have, and then having a discussion, and always putting a filter on it for women's health, because I think that it's still underserved. I think there's a lot of more conversations now, which is really exciting, and there's a lot of really great individuals in the I would say Juliet, you're certainly one of them. Stacey Sims is another. There's a lot of wonderful women in the space who I really respect and admire, and I still think there's a lot more work than
I don't know. I mean, there are exactly like 5 podcaster thinkers, and like there've been like 3 books. Haven't we covered it?
Yeah, just
I mean, are we?
There's like one peer-reviewed
Are we ready
study
to
on
move
women.
on here?
Yeah, we're good. We're good. Just check the box.
we had the
This-
Women's Health Initiative. That's all we needed, right?
Yeah, right.
Good Lord, I just want to double click and tap on the fact that, just reiterate, we say like we are just beginning to really appreciate. And we have a generation of women we need to make some promises up to, right? And also, can we apply this to the next generation of young people coming through who, have to benefit from this? Otherwise, it's just an amuse. Something that I want to just highlight that's very different about you is that a lot of practitioners, they come into grad school, they don't have a physical practice. They're not actually working where people are getting their health and fitness information.
Yeah.
It's almost like, hey, I'm med school. No one's practicing medicine and then goes to med school. But, I found that very few people in my graduate class were coaching, were teaching.
Or even exercising, let's be honest, on their own.
That's
I
right.
mean, sorry.
They did some exercise. No, they would go to yoga a
but
couple times
I
a
mean,
week,
It was pretty stark, actually.
And when we've spoken at med schools, it's one of the questions I ask: who has a physical practice in here? And very few people, have a physical practice. They may run or swim a little bit, but they're not in the mindset of, number one, where and how are people getting health information, and where are they being coached? And that must have been a really different. We opened a gym when I was in grad school, so I mean, we're on the same path. But how did that influence your educational experience? Because that I feel like is really important to understand, that you have been coaching and teaching predating your, becoming a clinician, and those 2 gigantic trees must have grown together.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for noticing that and for that comment. I think that a lot of, even in the social media landscape or terrain that we see now, there's a lot of people who I lovingly call, evidence-based internet trolls, right? So they will, right? So it's like, but there's no RCT. And it's like, well, yeah, but when you're talking to the general public, when you're talking to the layperson, they don't care about an RCT. They want action items, and they want you to be able to translate science in a way that makes sense for them in their life. And so I think that when we think about evidence-based practices in general, certainly you can derive, if you're, you can look at what's available on PubMed, you can look at what's available in the literature, but there's almost like an overlapping Venn diagram where we see like what's available, what RCTs, what meta-analyses do we have, and then what's the, the clinical experience of the clinician. So how do we take the RCTs and the evidence and translate it into real life? So that's kind of the second circle, is like clinical, the art and science of clinical practice. And then I'd say the third overlapping circle is the desire of the patient, right? It's like, what does the patient want? So you can talk all day long about, I see this all the time on my Instagram. Like, I talk a lot about sprinting, and I'm sure we'll get into it, but there's a lot of people that are like, well, I don't really like 100% all out effort. Like, I'd rather do my Pilates and yoga. So like, I'm good. So it's also, okay, I'm not going to browbeat you into doing track sprints, but I'm going to present the evidence to you. And I'm going to maybe show you an actionable way that you can, if you want to improve VO2 max, if you're like a nerd and you want to learn about what's VO2 max, what does that mean? Okay. And then how do I translate that into action? That's the clinical piece of it. And then what does the patient want? Does the patient want this or not? Because I learned this very early in practice, I can't want it more for the patient than the patient wants it themselves.
Bless your heart for saying that out loud.
And
right?
I mean, I really love that Venn diagram idea. And I think we really, in this space, seem to put all our eggs in the RCT circle.
Yeah.
And, especially, and we'll get into this, when it comes to women, well, there aren't very many studies. And so in many cases, we have to rely on clinical practice and, desire of the patient, or our own desires as patients ourselves. And we also
let me
have to
expand
rely
clinical
on
practice, as in you are responsible for your own cooking, and you're seeing inputs and outputs. I think there are so many of the internet trolls, actually don't have practices. They don't actually coach
Right.
people,
They
and they don't
don't.
coach people and are responsible for their health for long periods of time. And so
Yeah.
you really, I think the story that you shared, where this anecdotal experience where you're like, hey, we're keto, like, let's eat less carbs. And all of a sudden you're like, wow, this doesn't seem to be serving 50% of the people that I'm
Yeah,
Right.
which is
purporting
something
to
I want to
serve.
dive into. But yeah, I mean, I just really think, we are at a place, and we'll talk a lot about women's health, but we are at a place where, at least when it comes to the science, it almost has to be like good enough or hopeful. And we have to be like, okay, well, it's promising seems to need to be the word that we all can rely on when it comes to women's health. Like, there's promising evidence that hormone replacement therapy, improves your cardiovascular risk and dementia risk. But, we're not, I mean, I'm 52. I'm not going to wait around until there's a,
Right.
fully peer reviewed study when I'm 90 to confirm that that is true or not true. Right. So, I mean, we're stuck in this phase, especially as women, where it's like, okay, we can't rely on the science all the time because there is none, especially when it comes to women. So
Well,
I love what you're saying, because I think, obviously, I'm not saying we don't look at what science is out there.
Yes.
Obviously, that's very important, but it is this three-pronged thing. And I think that's just so insightful.
Yeah.
Right.
The one of the things that also is unique as a clinician, so you're having this education and you're always viewing it through, does this make sense in my own experience as an athlete? Because I remember, I mean, in grad school, I was like, I've been at the Olympic Training Center, I've been on national teams, I've trained, I'm like, I don't know when this applies. And it's almost like we had this model of musculoskeletal neurologic care that was sort of obviously important. People have been trying to improve the problems of the human condition for as long as there have been people, but it grew up agnostic to what was happening in sports and exercise and movement.
Right.
And it was, when I opened the gym, I was seen as a pariah. Like, there was a really excellent physical therapist I worked with who was a Maitland and senior instructor. She was just total badass. And she was like, you're going to have to decide, are you a coach or are you a clinician? And I mean, that was an early conversation I had. And I was like, both, more of everything.
Yeah, no, both. I choose A and B. Yeah.
Yeah, you're like A and B. Yeah, this isn't multiple choice.
So how, one of the things you described in your clinic was that it wasn't just like one-dimensional clinic. When, as a young clinician, do you start to realize that it's not enough to see someone once a week or 3 times or 12 visits for this problem? When you start to branch out and recognize, I'm going to have to become competent in nutrition, in exercise, in sleep, in stress, in female biology, women biology, if I'm going to be worth a shit as a clinician. When does that happen for you?
Oh gosh. Well, I can tell you in the first couple of years, I was an absolute tool of a clinician.
So
because
say
I
we
was-
all. I'm so sorry, everyone, if you ever
It's
saw
like,
me as
I'm
a
so
patient.
sorry to my first patients. You are absolutely my guinea pig. But thank you for that's why we call it a practice, not a perfect, right? Practicing. I would say it's a good question. I don't know if I had like an aha moment, but I know certainly with trying to rehab patients, we would always look at things like how, can you eat well, move well, think well? It was like kind of those 3 loose buckets. And it was like, okay, which adjustment was it that got rid of your back pain? Which salad was it that lowered your inflammation? Like which lift session grew, like which glute session grew your glutes? It's like all of them, right? So it was like, and it's not just the one adjustment, it's not just the one salad, it's not just the one workout at the gym. It was all of them, and it was an accumulation of them with time. So I think for me, it just, I guess, I don't have an exact answer for you, but I would say it just evolved with my experience working with patients. It's like,
Yeah.
all right, you can. And even with my, I was talking to you before we got started with my latest program that I've put out. It's called Lift. Even in the intro, one of my producer, she asked me a question, and as I was introducing the program, and she's like, "Okay, so how long do people have to do this?" And I'm like, "Well, forever." It's like if you want, like,
I'm sorry, what's the question here?
But this isn't just a one-time thing. You can lift
Yeah.
once and you're set for life. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not this and it's like I totally, when I launched the program, I was like, man, I'm totally going against the sort of marketing norms where it's like, 10 pounds in 10 days and like 6-week boot camp. And here's this really short delta that you're going to, this short timeline that you're gonna get these huge results for. It's like, I didn't get those results in 6 weeks. I didn't grow, whatever strength or power or muscular development in 6 weeks. So I felt sort of out of integrity, even though like, marketing, gurus would tell me I'm committing suicide, it's like marketing suicide. But it's like, yeah, this you got to do it forever. Like if you want to lower your inflammation, if you want to build muscle, if you want to sleep well, you want to be, efficient at clearing glucose, like all those things, like you have to do all those things kind of all the time. You can't just do them
Amazing.
once.
True fact. So I have to go back in and dig in on this finding you had in your clinic with this, husband wife situation,
Yeah, yeah.
because I have had so many friends. In fact, one of our close couple friends, and I'm not going to say their names, but this was maybe 8 years ago. They both started out on some kind of diet, and the husband literally lost like 40 pounds, and he's kept it off.
And
ever
it wasn't
since.
about performance. It wasn't.
No.
It was about body
It
composition.
was just
only, right?
purely body composition for these two. And same thing. They're doing the same thing. They're maybe he was moving a little bit more than her, but functionally speaking, they were doing the same thing, and he was able to lose like 40 pounds, and he's kept it off ever since. And she lost a little bit of weight, gained it all back, and has continued to struggle ever since.
Yeah.
And of course, she's went through perimenopause and menopause during that time. And if you have women presenting to you in your clinic or in your online programs or where in any part of your life, where do you begin this conversation? Because I think, again, we know the science says it's calories in, calories out, and then it's also probably more complicated than that, especially at certain times of our lives. How
Sure.
do you begin to address this? Because body composition is such a big thing for so many people, and women in particular, especially as we go through perimenopause and menopause. Like, where do you even begin with a client like that?
Yeah. Gosh, it's a good question. I would say that the beginning is we have to just start unlearning. Like we just have to understand as women that we're not just smaller, pesky archetype. We're not just like smaller archetypes of men with like pesky hormones, right? We actually are. There are some sexual dimorphisms that are very important that we understand. One, of course, is that we have a menstrual. I mean, maybe the most obvious. We have a menstrual cycle, so we have for about 40-ish years of our life we have this hormonal milieu that is constantly changing over the course of, we call it 28 to 34-ish days. And that our estradiol, or the presence of estrogen, um, makes us hold on to our fat stores longer. We are much more sensitive to nutrient sensing or lack of nutrients, right? So if you are prolonged, I'm sure you see this all the time, women who have been on this prolonged caloric restricted diet for a long time. It's like, they start off at 1600 and then they lose weight and then that stops working. So they go down to 1400 and then they go down to 1200 and then they're at 1100 and then that stops working. It's like, girl, where are you going to go from 1100 calories, right? So
Right.
what ends up happening, women are much more defensive of their fat stores, and we are much more sensitive to nutrient deprivation. So when that happens, your body is literally going to rail against what you're doing. And, the proper term for that, of course, is like metabolic adaptation. So you're going to start seeing things like we're going to start seeing digestion slowing down. The same stimulus, like if were on the elliptical or you're doing a step class or whatever, and you used to be able to, let's say, burn 300 calories, then the same stimulus now you are not like maybe cruelly, you're not going to burn as many calories because your body is literally conserving. You're going to be conserving as much as you can. You're going to start to um, use functional tissue like your muscles, which ends up making you thinner, or the weight on the scale goes down, but over time you're becoming relatively fatter. It's like what we would call like a thin on the inside, or sorry, thin on the outside, fat on the inside. So I forget the TOFI. Yeah, thin outside, fat on the inside. So you just become relatively have more adipose tissue. So I think that's the first thing that women need to understand, that we are not just smaller men. We have less testosterone, which of course is involved in, muscle mass and keeping fat stores in check. So understanding that. And I think that the great unlearning at least I have found this whenever I've counseled women specifically on nutrition, is sometimes when we can actually give the body signs of safety, meaning food. So if you are feeding the body will shed. The body will shed weight. I can't tell you how many times I've had women eat more food than they've ever been used to eating before. And of course, in the beginning, they're petrified, but we establish rapport. We do it very slowly, so it's something that they can get on board with. Even sometimes it's just like an extra cup of fruit. They have dinner and then they have some extra fruit at the end. Like that's sometimes the step that we take. And they'll come back after a couple weeks like, I can't believe that I've lost weight. I'm eating more food than I ever have before. So I think that
And
that's
probably feeling way better, right? Just
and
feeling way
better
better.
and sleeping better and mood and performance and
Right.
all the things that come from it. But I think that the first thing is like the great
What's
unlearning,
in
right?
that?
So I love the
What's in
calories.
that bowl of fruit?
Yeah, yeah, that's like it's spiked with GLP-1s. No, I'm kidding. No, it's just fruit. It's just like I think I've had a couple of different conversations on the show with psychologists and around mindfulness and stress. And I think for women, and maybe Kelly, you can speak to this, as a man. But I think for women, we need to feel in order to heal, right? In order to make progress, whether it's metabolic or body composition progress, mindfulness, we need to feel safe. And so in terms of body composition, I think that the safety signal is food. Yeah. So that's sort of how I would
I love
start.
it. I love it.
Yeah.
I have to jump in here and say that's the first time I've ever heard that idea wrapped up in the terms of safety and signaling
Yeah,
safety,
that's
because we
really
talk about
important.
non-threatening inputs and and signaling
Yeah.
to the brain that what we're doing is safe. And because we work in high performance sports, there are so many times where I have conversations about a performance benefit of people belonging, of feeling safe, of trust, of vulnerability. And that is such a keystone to elite performance, to belonging,
Right.
to
So
feel safe.
of course it applies.
Oh my
to
gosh.
what you're
I
putting
feel
into your
like,
body.
wow, that's
Yeah.
one of the most like insightful things I've ever heard about nutrition, is signaling to the brain, you are safe here. And we're going to have to do that by getting you more micronutrients and more nutrient dense foods. It is amazing when we ask people. Juliet and I have stumbled on a solution from one of our friends. And the first thing we do is we don't restrict anything. We have to make everyone eat 800 grams of fruits and vegetables. And people are shocked. I mean, how many calories is that? Like 500 or 600
500.
calories?
It's not that many calories.
We're like, oh,
But
is that too many apples for you?
Yeah,
Are
but
you too
volume
full?
wise,
It's shocking.
yeah,
to
volume
people.
wise, especially for women who have been on the restriction train for many years, it feels like so much food
Yeah.
that it's shocking. And I have to remind people like, hey, if this is sort of a mixed fruit and vegetable, this is 500 calories. This is not, you're not overeating here.
One of the things that I love about this message from you particularly is that as a provider who puts her hands on people, I can tell if tissue is, good, bad, stiff. And if you're healing, we always say you either heal at the rate of a human being or you heal slower. You can't, no one's a fast healer. You're just either like, here's what the biology says, it takes this long to heal, or you're going to go slower than that. And for the longest time, of course, I'm into fueling and nutrition, but I did not want to talk about nutrition
You are
because
not into it.
fueling.
Okay. Yeah.
Carbs.
Fueling you are.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Making sure we have enough fuel on board. But as Juliet said, one of the things I did not want to have a conversation about is I didn't want to talk to people about body composition. But it just wasn't interesting to me as a coach. I mean, and yes, we have to, when someone needed to be a certain weight to do their sport, that was a very specific thing, and I would have them work with a professional. But more I got into my clinical working with athletes, coaching, I was like, we have to be talking about food because we're talking about your tissue health and your gut health, right, and your skin and your integument. And if I don't have those conversations, I'm going to have tissues that cannot take the loading. And we particularly started to see it when the GLP-1s came up, and in our sort of 50 age demographic where women were losing so much bone mass and so much lean muscle mass.
Yeah,
because
they were doing that before GLP-1s.
I'm just saying, but as a function for men, even men, I think maybe that's why it popped up suddenly, is that we're like, holy moly, this nutrition piece is such a big piece of this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, please continue.
Well, I just, as your people are coming into your program, I feel like we have really done people a disservice. They don't have a system of thinking about what's the program for this bone crushing consistency for the rest of my life. So one of the things that as I was looking at you, Juliet had talked about working with you and or being on your podcast, and I was like, just become curious. And I was like, that woman can deadlift. And I was like, legit. And I saw you sprinting and I was like, oh, I trust this person. Like, this is my provider. This is like, you're doing the things, real weight on the bar, real sprinting.
Yeah. Well, okay. I got a question. You mentioned it earlier, and I really wanted to bring this up because I love this phrase. And you have said that you've called the menstrual cycle a vital sign.
Yeah.
And I think we even talked about this on the podcast, that we have 10 vital signs in our book, Built to Move. And we love that phrase. And the reason we love it is that it's sort of this way of saying, hey, vital signs have always been understood in a medical context, but there's no reason why we all can't handle and manage a bunch of sort of personal vital signs, physical vital signs, and keep an eye on them on our own without anybody's assistance. So tell me what you mean by the menstrual cycle as a vital sign, because I love that phrase.
Sure. Yeah. I would say that one of the blessings of being a woman is that every month you get a report card. You get a hormonal report card telling you how you did that month, managing your stress with your nutrition and your fitness and your recovery and all the things. And that comes in the form of your menstrual cycle. And you can actually garner a lot of information about your bleed. So if you're a woman, and this is a perimenopausal woman as well, because perimenopausal women, like I'm 47, still, still cycling, menstruating regularly, still like 28 days sort of on the nose at this point, anyway, at the time of this recording. But you can garner a lot of information. Like by the time it comes out, it'll be all gone.
Yeah. It'll be like 50 days.
But,
Yes.
Yeah. But when we look at your bleed week, you can take a look at how long you're bleeding. So actually, before I even get into some of the details, the first thing every woman who's listening to the show should be doing is tracking her cycle. It can be on an app. You can do it like old school pen and paper. You can, there's so many great apps where you can track length. You can track through the course of the cycle. You can track things like cervical mucus, which I don't know if it's TMI, but we can certainly talk about that. We can talk about cramping.
No.
We can talk about all the things. So specifically with the first week of your cycle. So when I say menstrual cycle, I'm referring to the whole thing, like the 28, 29 days. Your period, of course, is the first days of your cycle. So anywhere between like 3 and 7 days is considered a normal length of bleed. And so if you're tracking that over time, that's one data set that you can look at. So, hey, I used to bleed like pretty regularly for 6 days, and now I'm bleeding 4 days. So there's like there's little information that you can garner from that. You can also garner the type of flow that you have. So is the flow very heavy in the beginning and then it sort of tails off, or is it heavy all the way through? Typically, when you look at what heavy is, it's a couple of teaspoons, let's say, of blood a day. So if you have like a cup, like a menstrual cup that you're wearing, you might need to change that once or twice a day. If you're wearing pads, no more than like 3 to 4 pads per day. More than that would be considered very heavy, right? So you can use some of those benchmarks to evaluate the flow, like the heaviness of the blood over the course of the week. You can also look at the color. So is the color in the beginning very dark? Is it like very much oxygenated blood, right? So is it a very like ruby red, magenta color? And then over the course of the week, does it get a little bit lighter? At the end of it, is it brown? That kind of thing. Is there spotting before you start? So there's all that. Even just the quality of the blood itself. Sorry to all the guys, we're talking a lot about this.
No, this is fantastic.
Yeah. So
Kelly
clotting,
loves
do we see clotting? And and some clotting is normal, but how big are the clots? Typically, I like to say no bigger than a dime. Anything bigger than like a nickel or a quarter, now we're starting to get into bigger clots. And that can indicate more estrogen or unopposed estrogen in the second half of the cycle. I know we haven't talked about the hormones, how they rise and fall yet, but in the second half of the cycle, we have sort of two main players, progesterone and estrogen. And progesterone uh, when you're like 35, like mid to late 30s, we actually start to see progesterone steadily decline. And so what can happen in the second half of the cycle, progesterone should rise and there should be more of it relative to estrogen. But when that level now is not sufficient, then we start to see unopposed estrogen, where a lot of people will call this estrogen dominance. That's sort of the layperson might describe it like that, like there's more estrogen, but technically it's like unopposed estrogen in the luteal phase of the cycle, but nobody says that. So, estrogen dominance, which can be tender breasts, water retention, feeling very hot at night, having trouble sleeping, being very moody and emotional, right? So, and all these things, there's like a certain gradient of normal, and which is fine, but in the extreme it can be, it can really affect quality of life. It can affect the person's quality of life. So you can think about some of those things in terms of your bleed week. You can also look at what your energy levels and your sex drive looks like over the course of the month as well, because there's some predictable oscillations as well in that. A lot of women will report feeling more receptivity to sex, to having sex, more desire for sex right before she ovulates. So whether or not you want to have a baby, your testosterone is going to kind of rise right before you release an egg. And that's, from an evolutionary perspective, that makes a lot of sense. It's like that's when the egg's going to be released. So if you're having sex in and around that time, then the likelihood of you getting pregnant might be higher. So there's a lot of different ways that you can sort of measure how you're doing. The other thing, of course, is a lot of women, many women will feel very. I mentioned it a little bit, but very emotional, very teary, very sensitive, and generally more inflamed in the second half of the cycle. So you can track some of those symptoms. I've mentioned some of them already, like the tender breast and the water retention and the sleep. Crying at commercials that you would have never otherwise, cried at. And I think again, some of that is there's an exquisite sensitivity that allows us to sort of relate to our environment that I think is important. But again, in the extreme, if you're not able to, participate in your life because of it, then we also want to know that. So I really am a big, big, big fan of collecting small little data points like that. So if you do go to your provider and say, "Hey, my cycle, I used to be like a 31, like on the money, 31 days, and now I'm like 28. And now I'm noticing that my cycle has shortened, or my period length has shortened from 7 days and now it's 4. And I'm noticing that I'm getting more clotting and I'm noticing X, Y, and Z." Then you can have a better conversation with your primary healthcare provider. And the likelihood of you getting a better outcome from that is going to be so much higher, rather than kind of going in without a lot of information for you and your doctor to work on.
This episode of The Ready State is brought to you by Momentous. And today we have swapped out Kelly Starrett for a special guest, Jeff Byers, the CEO of Momentous himself. Welcome, Jeff.
Hey.
So what I want to talk to you about today is the Momentous 3, because I know that those 3 things are your ride or die supplements. Tell us what they are and why they are like the most, like no matter what supplements in your day.
Yeah, I'll tell you how we got to the Momentous 3. Not surprising. Everybody would ask me, "Oh, what do you do?" "Oh, I have this company called Momentous." And then like, "Oh, just a lame ass supplement company." And you'd go into, "Oh, here's what makes us special. We work with all these pro teams and these experts, and we have our quality standards are so unique in the category." And then the next question is, what should I take? And I used to answer that very differently. I used to just tell people everything I took, right? My entire laundry list. But I'm an N01, just like you are, right? Like you need B vitamins, right? I don't.
Right.
Over here. And ultimately what I started doing is
I'm old, you're young.
Yeah, ish. What I started doing was just asking the smartest people I knew, all the dietitians, all the experts in the category of like, what are the 3 most important things, if you had to paint a wide brush, that have the most impact for humans? And they always came back and said the 3 same things.
Which are?
Protein, creatine, and omegas. And there's 3 reasons why. Realistically, the body of literature is so strong for all those 3 things, right? Really hard to get from your diet into practical amounts that have impact for longevity.
Right, in optimal amounts.
And optimal amounts, and there's no cross-reactivity. right? They're also pretty cost effective. But the other thing is, not all omegas, creatine, and protein are created equal.
Nope.
And what we've done is just, how do we source the most efficacious, right, the most sustainable and the cleanest forms that we can over all of those three, so that when we think about foundation building, right, you build a house on strong foundations. And that's what we're trying to do with our health, is you built it on it. And so if you can master those three things, I even hesitate to call them supplements anymore, and they're more core nutrients. And yeah, you should be eating protein from your diet, and you can get creatine from your diet, and you can get omegas from your diet, but not
optimal amounts.
Not every day, and not practically. And those are the three things that have so much clinical data behind them that you really don't necessarily have to get blood work done to know if you need to consume those things.
Yeah, and I would just say that those are the things that Kelly and I, like, if we travel, if we're getting busy, crazy, if we run out of anything, like, those are always the same three things we take no matter what. And the other thing that we are obsessed with and love about Momentous is the rigorous safety standards. Everything is NSF and NSF for sports certified. Did I say that right?
Yep. Oh, yeah.
And so we know that when we spend money on these awesome products, we're getting what we actually thought we bought, which is really unique in the category. So
yeah, that's part of the Momentous standard, is use the highest certification that we can, and the certification that's trusted by the most elites in the world, because what's in their product actually matters, and it should matter to consumers as well. And that we've chosen to be NSF certified for sport.
Well, there you have it. Jeff Byers, CEO of Momentous. If you want to learn more about the Momentous 3 and all the other amazing products they make, go to livemomentous.com/TRS and use code TRS and save up to 35% at checkout. This episode of the Ready State Podcast is brought to you by Element.
We are going to say it. It's so important. Lemonade flavor is here.
You can't even understand the level of excitement in our house about this.
And not only is lemonade like a breakthrough for me, I've made the Salty Palmer. I think we coined hashtag Salty Palmer. We started making a Salty Palmer. That was amazing. One of the things that I just did, because it's starting to turn cool.
Where's hot lemonade?
Yeah, it tasted like a beautiful hot lemon tea. I was like,
it was so good. It was so good. I had one too.
I just sprinkled some dust and I was like, I'm out.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's basically a miracle, because there was a while where this was just going to be a seasonal flavor. And I think Element has made the very right decision to bring it in as a continuous flavor.
Yeah. And as we're moving into the fall and pumpkin spice latte season, I want to suggest that you, Lisa just barfed in her mouth a little bit. I just want to point out that one of the things that happens when people go inside is sometimes they stop drinking water.
Right.
And if you want to have healthy tissues, if you want to have tissues that can take the load, you want to feel less brain foggy, you've got to drink some water, people. This lemonade makes it so easy. And I put it in a huge hot flask and I drink it all day long, and it's a game changer.
Yeah, and Element has a bunch of flavors like chocolate and chocolate mint that are meant, I think, originally to be drank hot. But we've really expanded upon that. I mean, I love the lemon lime hot. I love the raspberry salt hot, the lemonade hot. And so it's just like our winter time, like, yummy drink and hydration strategy is to drink hot Element.
I'm telling you, when you need that 3 or 4 o'clock bump, go ahead and have a little hot lemonade. So good. Look, right now, if you order through our link, you can get a free sample pack of Element's most popular drink mix flavors. And if you want a party in your mouth, what do we do?
Try sparkling.
So go to drinklmnt.com/TRS. What do we say?
We literally drink it every day.
Every day.
So yeah, that's like I'm sure you have a lot of questions.
I think that is...
Yeah.
I think that is such critical advice. And in fact, we're in the musculoskeletal space always trying to train people to do a similar thing, which is, hey, before you show up at your PT or your orthopedic surgeon, try this and this and this and these things, and then be able to show up and say, hey, I've had this low back pain and I tried this and I did this and I tried these 17 things. And, and you're knowing that physicians are in this very difficult position often of having 10 minutes with each patient, or less in some cases,
6 to 8.
6 to 8 minutes with each patient. I really do think it behooves you to come in armed with some really valuable information And as you said, be able to say, hey, this is what I'm seeing. These are the trends and changes I'm noticing. What do you think? And you're
Yeah.
going to get so much more out of that visit. And, ultimately your health is going to improve because you're actually going to have, a really, like, as you said, a great outcome. And the same goes for, your physical health. I mean, that same principle applies. And we're always trying to get people to, take a crack at, working on themselves and seeing what they can do, because they're going to get so much more out of those visits if they do. And I love it in the context of
And let me just highlight that the depth and nuance of that conversation. We're just getting finally to a place where clinicians and coaches are saying, do you have a period? I mean, that's step one. And think about how insensitive that is. 1 or 0. That tells me a lot.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of information before you stop getting your period. I mean, that's, because of REDs or, all the things that can possibly be. So I want to just, reiterate how amazing that how insightful that is when you're working with 50% of the population. And again, maybe as the token cis hetero white guy, I'm like, hey, this is something to explore. Here are some great resources, but you have to know yourself, and we don't know ourselves. I think that sets us up really beautifully. One of the tenets of what you're doing in the education is that you're saying, hey, we have to lift a weight, and you're having to unlearn the fear of being bulky. J-Star, I'm
talk
hoping
about this all the time.
I'm hoping you get bulky someday. You've only been lifting weights since you were like 12.
A girl can continue to dream.
I know. There's a ton of hesitation, of course, around strength training for women, and especially in their 40s and 50s. It seems like there are a lot of misconceptions. I'd love to hear what you think some of the biggest misconceptions are. I think we can probably guess some, but I'd love to hear your perspective. And then 2, why that's so important for people in this back half of our lives, particularly women. We have to strength train.
Yeah. I mean, I hear it all the time too. It's like, I don't want to get bulky. I already think that I'm thick. I just want to tone and lengthen, which I have to tell you, gives me like an angry tick when I try to suppress the tick.
Yeah.
You've been trained. If you have high tone, I'm like, something's wrong with your cerebellum.
Even if you just say tone and lengthen, I'm like, I find my head like twitching a little bit too.
Like,
I feel you on that.
Gattaca, we're going to lengthen your femurs. We can lengthen those.
That's a reflex. Like if you test reflexes, like they're hypertonic, hypotonic, atonic, like that's tone. That's tone. It's a nervous system comment, but it is not, like tone. What people are talking about, and this is where, the fitness industry has really done us dirty, is like they've said, you just want to lengthen and tone. It's like tone. If you're talking about it in that context, I know what they're trying to say. It's like you want some muscle, but not a lot. Like you want some muscle to show, but not too much. And that
you still want mostly your arm to look like a stick with like a tiny bit,
just like a little bump,
maybe little bump there.
Yeah. Meanwhile, I'm trying to like my goal in life is to have to turn sideways to like walk through a door, like on my shoulders.
Oh, see, we are twins. I'm telling you, my body dysmorphia is showing already. Like I'm the tiniest person in the room always.
Yeah. And so I feel like this tone thing comes back to bulk. And I think we actually talked about this on the show. I had a guest, she was a strong woman on the podcast a couple of years ago. And she was like, did you ever see Pumping Iron? I'm like, of course I have. It's my Bible. And she was like, have you ever seen Pumping Iron for women? And I was like, what? There's a Pumping Iron for women. And so of course, like I had to find in the, went to the corners of the internet to find this, equivalent to the Schwarzenegger Pumping Iron for women. And she was saying, like, there was this one woman that was competing in the Miss Olympia with like Rachel McLish and all these guys, and all these women, and she was much more. She might have had some, some genetic anomaly where she just had so much androgens, like she was very, very developed. And they penalized her for that. And so the whole sort of video or that whole movie was about like women not being too bulky. And she's like, do you know what bulky means? I was like, no. She's like, it means taking up space. I was like, huh, isn't that interesting that women are so afraid of being bulky? They're so afraid of taking up space. And it's like, even if we looked hormonally, even if we just let it's so, yes, there for sure you're going to have the genetic, the outliers, the 90, like the 1%, and the 99, like on either side of the bell curve. But for the vast majority of women, like for 98% of us, you cannot get bulky if there are no exogenous things that you're taking, right? Like your own endogenous hormone production is not going to allow for that. And so I think that there's that tone, this like fear of building muscle. And, I have muscle and I have been working out for a long, nobody's ever said that I look bulky. No, I mean, I love the pump at the end of my, like, okay, this is what I'm going to look like in like 6, 9 months, like I love looking at my muscles and seeing them show. So that's the one thing. The other thing that I hear a lot is like lengthening. Like, I just want like long, lean, like the
Yeah,
Pilates body.
what does
And it's
that
like,
mean?
I don't even know because for me, I'm okay. So my mechanistic brain is like, okay, you can't change origin and insertion points. So what are you talking about with lengthening? Are you meaning like taking the bicep off the coracoid process and you're like, where are you going to put it? So I don't understand that. I just think it's kind of back to the whole, you're thinking of the, this sort of long, lean ballerina,
Right.
the Pilates
I mean,
princess kind of look. That's what I think.
can I just say, I think it just means skinny.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah,
that's
yeah,
really right. I mean,
yeah.
right?
You think
If we're
that's
getting
code?
down
That's
to it,
code.
it's code for skinny,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay, so
Oh yeah, sorry.
we program generations of people to not take up space, right?
Yeah.
We're telling, and we run a gym for nearly 20 years, and we did have women come in, and they would, say, "Hey, I really am afraid of getting bulky," and I would
Yeah.
say to them, every single one, I had one rephrase: "When you start getting too big, let me know, and
Yeah.
we'll change your program."
Yeah.
And they were like, "Oh, great." And I'd just be like, "Hey, this is a safe place. I totally understand. You have
Yeah.
an idea what when your body starts to look in a way that you don't want it to look anymore, just let me know." And in 20 years, I never had a single person who wasn't like, "I didn't get enough pull-ups. Like, my deadlift is too small." And I was like, "What happened to your
Yeah.
gyat? Weren't you worried about your gyat getting big? It's not big enough now." So, I think you really are hitting on this piece, but it sets us up for such devastation for the back half of our lives.
Man, you're so right. Yeah.
So talk about why and this is important because I think we can really, because you're a coach and you're in a lifting program, people think they're lifting weights. We were just at a tournament for our daughter, and we watched a lot of people come into the gym because Juliet and I are randomly in the gym a lot. It's so weird. And we watched them just do a bunch of silly bullshit. They would stand on one leg and move the kettlebell around, and they do like grab the pink dumbbells and do some flies and then like some abs. And they were like, "I lifted weights." And Juliet and I were like, "The hell you lifted a weight?"
Yeah. So I mean, we started to see. I think I even did a post about this recently, where we're like, okay, this is amazing. There's the message is getting out to lift weights.
Yeah.
But now I think we need to shift the message to being not all programs are created equal. And if you actually really want to do progressive strength and conditioning, there's certain things you need to be doing.
Yeah, talk about
Yeah.
why this is so important, particularly for women in this phase, and define what you mean when you say lift weights, because you're doing real strength training in
And
your
then
program.
could I just add a third bullet to that? How do we deprogram? Because I think there's this sort of impression on the internet that like women are lifting weights, and it is true. More and more women are going to commercial gyms. There's data showing that they're asking about lifting weights, but I still see in my community a lot of women who they know they should be doing it, and they do work out. So they carve out time to work out. So they're not sedentary, but they cannot bring themselves to do it. And I think that's a programming issue. So that was a lot of questions in one, Dr. Stephanie.
Yeah. Well, first,
Take whichever one you want to go with.
I want to actually acknowledge what you said, Kelly, which was, in the time of the gym, I said, "Hey, if you're getting too big, like we'll change your programming." I actually think that is such. I think that that's also just evidence of a high quality coach, because you're meeting them where they are. You're actually acknowledging the fear, and you're like, "Hey, if that actually comes true, I have a plan for you. Like, I've got you. You're safe." So I just want to say that that's such a wonderful way to reframe it. I've heard people talk about. I've heard people say things like, you're not just because you play soccer doesn't mean that you're going to all of a sudden turn into like Ronaldo. Like, just because you drive a car, you're not going to all of a sudden be like a NASCAR, driver, So it's the same with lifting weights. Like, just because you lift weights, it doesn't mean that you're going to bulk up. And I also understand where your fear is coming from. And so we have a plan of action if you start to see, undesirable changes. So I just want to say that's just such a wonderful way to frame the objection, let's say, to lifting weights in a way that is because the tendency is like, oh my God, you're so dumb. Of course you're not going to get bulky.
Right.
That.
But
Right.
inside, I'm like, you wish.
Right. But you know what I love about the through line of that comment from Kelly, and then what you were talking about with nutrition, and this is probably really more true for women, is the safety piece, right? Like this is again
Yeah.
a way of making someone feel safe, and meeting them where they are.
Yeah. Okay. So I wrote down some of your questions, so I'm going to answer all of them to the best of my ability, and then let me know if you want more or less. So why it's important in midlife and beyond. So perimenopause and menopause. Like we were saying before, this code word for skinny, whether it's toned, lengthened, Pilates body, whatever, maybe you can get away with that look when you're 25, 35, 45. But being skinny when you're 65, looking frail and, breakable, if we're just talking aesthetics, is not a good look, right? So I'll say that is number one. I think when we get into form and function, we want to be thinking about a couple things. One of the natural consequences, if you will, of aging is that we become more insulin resistant, just as a natural function of aging, meaning that the hormone that is designed to drive glucose into the cells so that now glucose is inside the cell and it can make energy, we start to see that the cells don't respond in the same way that they once did. So what ends up happening is we tend to see more blood glucose in the circulating plasma, and then of course and the knock-on effect is that the pancreas is like, oh, there's more glucose here, we need more insulin. And so there's it's this like really vicious loop that where we are not making use of the fuels that we are eating, that we're consuming. And so one of the ways that building muscle really helps to ameliorate that, one of the beautiful things of muscle, it's like so much reverence for the human body, like, chef's kiss to the designer, is that you can take up, you can take glucose up in an insulin independent and dependent way. So muscle can take up glucose in the presence of insulin and when insulin is nowhere to be found. Okay. So this is one of the beautiful things. Like the more muscle that you have, the better, we'll say, glucose disposal agent you are. Like the more you can actually bring the glucose out from the plasma and bring it into the cell so that your body can actually make energy. A lot of people as they age, one of the big things is like they're more tired. They don't have the same energy to do the things that they once did. So this is a really really big one. Another thing that I would say, just when we just look at the sort of morphology and just the muscle itself, one of the things that we lose if we're not being strategic, specifically to the muscle, is strength. And we've been talking about like, our glutes, or maybe my glutes, walking out of the room like 2 minutes after I do, or having to turn sideways to get through doors. Like that's a conversation about hypertrophy, right? That's a conversation of muscle size, which is a slightly different outcome than muscle strength. So strength, of course, is how forcefully you can contract like how quickly the fibers in the muscle can sort of cross over each other and generate force. And before we lose mass, before we start to become frail and look super skinny and breakable when we're 75, we actually lose strength first. And so I would say that there are a couple of there's overlap for training for hypertrophy and strength for sure, but I would say that maintaining your strength, staying as fast as you can in the weight room, and then there's other ways that we can talk about, I think is super important to age well. And there's a couple of like, if you are wanting to
I'm
travel,
crying on the inside right now. I just want you to know, I'm just hearing this and I'm like, it's so beautiful.
you're like, it's poetry. It's poetry.
Yeah, we are. We're both like this.
I'm like,
we're like,
confirmation
this is so
bias,
dreamy.
be strong and
This
powerful.
is so dreamy.
If you are someone, once you're in your golden years and you want to travel, you don't want to ask someone to pull your suitcase off of the conveyor, but you want to get in there and pull it off yourself, right? Or you want to be able to put your overhead, the carry-on in the overhead bin behind you. When you're a grandmother, like I got to tell you, one of the reasons why I train now is like, I want to be the favorite grandmother. I want to be able to get on the floor. I want to be able to
Yes.
play with my grandbabies. I want to pick them up, throw them up in the air, take them to the park. Like, I don't want my children to be like, God, can she do it? I don't know. Are my kids safe with her? Is she gonna?
Yeah.
So I want you to think about, to the listener, I want you to think about what the strength is going to provide for you in later life. So it's like, you are going to be able to participate in your family. You are going to be able to travel. You're going to be able to maintain your independence. And then the other really big thing, which nobody, I mean, I know that it's discussed, but I think nobody really wants to face up to, is fall risk. And listen, we have fall risk now. Like, I can trip
Right.
over, like my kids will leave like soccer balls and stuff. Like I can trip on the corners of carpets. I can lose my footing on
Still the number one
stairs.
reason that all adults end up in the ER is
Yeah,
falls.
it's fall.
Number
Yeah,
one.
right. Number one for
It's
all
fall.
ages. Yeah.
For all ages, but your risk exponential, and this is the maybe the fallacy of human thinking sometimes, is we tend to think linearly, right? We tend to think, well, okay, I'm like a little slower now in my 40s than I was in my 30s, but it's not that bad. And we actually just think that progression is going to continue. Like it's just going to be that linear degradation, but there's an exponential fall off the cliff if you're not careful. And so if you are not training, at least, for speed, at least in the hip flexors, if you lose your footing, like you want your hip flexors to snap so that your foot can get ahead of your center of mass as you're falling and like catch your footing, like catch yourself before you fall down. Because if you have brittle bones, if you have, if you don't have the quad strength, the hamstring strength, the glute strength to put the brakes there, and you end up falling, we would call them like foosh injuries, like fall on outstretched hand, or if you fall on your hip and you fracture your hip, like that is a life altering event. Like if you're in the hospital,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure you guys have
Well,
worked
and
with
I mean,
that.
you're talking about
just-
something that we obsess about. We've seen everyone sort of like the phrase du jour is longevity. And
Yeah.
Juliet and I were like, it's cool. We appreciate that. But we think the hits are going to come and we want you to be durable.
Yeah,
So
we're
our
obsessed.
whole,
We've been
phrase is
touting
like,
durability for a long time.
we think you're going to fall. You're going to get sick. You're going to like, and you better have some tolerance in the system to handle that. And if you're at the margins of just survivability, it doesn't take much to have, a metastable event where suddenly you really are.
Yeah.
It's harder to put on bone mass. It's harder to put on muscle. It's not impossible. It's just harder. And so you really, where do you think, obviously both our daughters lift weights. It's very cool. They've just grown up with, world champion mama who has abs in her 50s, which is annoying, but a reality.
Parents
And,
of the year. Yep.
Yes. And, but the idea here is, we know that in your 20s and especially in your 30s, these are the times to really put on muscle mass and bone density. You almost ride on that. Where are you?
It's never too late.
It's never too late.
Never too late.
That's right. It's never too late.
Reminding everyone it's never too late.
What is your
never too late.
experience?
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. What is your experience when new lifters? Because I'm always into the beginner gains, but I have to believe that a lot of the people in your lift program may be lifting for the first time. We just talk about their experience because I think this sets it up for people. We want to give them a reason to lift a weight.
Yeah. So my big, another hill that I want to die on is form before load. So I really I know that we hear a lot of like lift heavy stuff, lift heavy, like lift heavy, like muscle mommy, muscle mommy, muscle. And it's like, yes, totally. And you don't necessarily have the neuromuscular coordination yet in order to be putting the 45, whatever it is on the barbells or moving the pin down on the machine or whatever it is. So I am a big, big, big stickler for form. As because of our backgrounds, like I've had my fair share of geriatric patients who can barely sit down on the chiropractic table to get their adjustment, right? So I've literally walked some of my beautiful older patients, like how to sit up and get down because I was concerned about them living on their own, having to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night and falling. So I think that we want to be thinking about form. We want to be thinking about joints. Right? These are you can't squat if you don't have knees. You can't do a pull up. Can't do a push up if you don't have wrists, or shoulders or bump shoulder. You can't do pull ups, same thing, bad elbows, bad shoulders, everything. So I think it's very, very important to master the form first. I think so many women, especially in our cohort, like this, 40s and women who are now in their 40s and 50s, Like I grew up in I was a cardio bunny. I grew up in the cardio section of the gym, right? So I've always been around weights, but I think that a lot of women would just like head straight to the elliptical, head straight to the, whatever it was. So I think form first, like master your own body weight, like figure, and I'm sure that you can speak to this as well. Doing a lunge properly, doing a squat properly, it is a rare event in the gym. Like if you just go to any old
Yeah,
gym and
right.
you watch people
Yeah.
squat, they're not doing it properly. Right. So there's compensations in, the pelvis is, posteriorly tilted, or the knee, the knee flexion is not sufficient. The ankles, there's so many areas in a squat that it can go wrong. Same with a lunge. So why don't we just master the form first, and then we can slowly and progressively add load. And then we talk about what progressive overload actually is, what when we think about growing muscle, if it's an aesthetic goal or just a hypertrophy goal, strength goal, what does it look like to be approaching muscle failure, right? So not just when the muscle starts to burn, right? Or when you feel like you want to stop, or if you've always done 15 reps before and you just stop at 15, like what does it actually look like from a rate of perceived exertion, or an RIR? We define that as well, reps in reserve, from when we're thinking about what does it look like to reach muscle failure. So there's sort of like a heuristic that I go through in the program, and I can share it here as well. When you're getting close to muscle failure, the velocity of the exercise starts to slow down, right? So rep 1 and rep 10, let's say, they don't look like you're not performing them at the same speed anymore. Like rep 10 is much slower because your muscles are having a hard time keeping up with the demand, right? The weight is going to start to feel subjectively heavier. Like it's 20 pounds or 50 pounds or 100, whatever the pound is, but it's going to start to feel much heavier than it did when you started, right? So
Gravity has been turned on.
yeah, yeah. So there's a couple of things that I'm cueing my participants to look out for, because I think most, like to your point, like it's like, the pink it and shrink it. It's like the 2-pound dumbbells, and I'm doing some burpees, and I'm doing, whatever combo movement that my, group fitness class I learned in my group fitness class, all the while not really taking any target muscle close to failure. So we want to understand what it means to get close to failure. But that's sort of a secondary step. Like the first is mastering form. So where should your knees be? Where should your back be? Where should you be feeling it? Like so many women, I mean, this is like another, maybe a little tangent, but so many women are quad dominant, right? When you start doing squats, so many women will say, I don't feel it in my glutes. I feel it in my quads. I feel it in the front of my thigh. So we have to work with them to play around with just developing that mind muscle connection to the glutes and the hamstrings. Like the posterior chain often is weaker in women than it is. We're just we tend to be quad dominant. Not everybody, but there's a tendency to be more quad dominant. So these are some of the things that I talk about in the program. Let's see what else. Have I answered your question? Do you have any questions
I
from
think
that?
so.
Yeah.
Well, we are getting near the end, and I can't get to the end of this without talking about a subject that all three of us are obsessed with, and that is sprinting.
Sprinting. Yes.
Yes. One. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, like we've been just trying to it's been hard for me to hold this one back because we all are so excited about sprinting, and we obviously included in your program. I know you're sprinting. I know you're obsessed with it. Tell us a little bit about why. We know why we think it's important, but I think we're all coming from different.
Let me set this up that I have been lifting weights a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, I should be so much stronger, but I'm just not a gifted lifter.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I
You're
have really strong friends.
Really strong.
Whatever.
His friends are like the friends who deadlift 1,000 pounds, and so that's why he has a skewed perspective, Dr. Stephanie.
Olympic lifter. So it's fine. But one of the things I've noticed at 52 is that if I don't keep my foot on the power gas, if I'm not power cleaning, if I'm not snatching, and again, that can be dumbbells, you can be done. If I'm not sprinting, that aspect of my physicality is the first thing to go. Like I have noticed that, whoa, I can still grind a deadlift out at, 500 pounds, no problem. But moving powerfully and jumping, that seems to rot very quickly. And it seems like you're saying this speed for recovery of falls, for this is something I've got to train and keep an eye on. Talk about how you came there and what that looks like.
Yes. So I agree with all of that. And I would say that my personal, like, I used to be a sprinter. So when in grade school, I was running 200, I was running 400s, I was on the relay team. And it just kind of, and I still sprinted like all through, like I was always doing some type of sprinting. It was either track sprinting or I was sprinting like, on a cardio machine or something like that. And then I had my two children, who are now almost 15 and 13. I have to get used to saying that, but almost 15, almost 13. And I kind of worked out and I was sprinting right up until my first was born. And then just like, all the things like life, mothering and all the stuff I've
Yeah.
taught, like clinic and divorce, like all the things like life was lifing. And I kind of, I stepped away from it and I've recently come back to it. And it was funny because every time I had the opportunity to sprint, I was like, "Oh, no, like, it's just that's not me," it's just, "Oh, no, I'll
Yeah,
just
you're
skip
like,
it.
that's my old self.
It's my old yeah, it's just my old self." And then I just recently went back to I don't just woke one day, I'm like, God damn, I'm just gonna go to the track. Like, I'm just gonna, put on my track shoes and we're gonna go." And I remembered how good I felt. So obviously lungs were burning. I was completely out of breath. If you've ever watched the Cars movie, I have two boys, so we watched this movie 1,000 times when they were younger. Finn McMissile says something like, you never feel more alive than when you're almost dead, right? And that's exactly how I felt. I was like, I feel almost dead, but I feel so proud of myself. I'm so proud of myself. I did 6 sprints. It was like all out max sprints. It took like probably 4 minutes, 5 minutes, maybe even between each sprint. So it took a little bit longer to get through, but I was so happy that I was able to do it. And it was interesting. Like after I got off that psychological hurdle of just like, I'm just gonna do it. Even if I just do one, I don't care. I'm just do one. I just want to see what I can still, what this 47-year-old body still got. Um, I really have seen a marked change even in my strength training. So I train for strength.
Yeah.
I train for first of all, my endurance is different, but I'm like PRing my brains out right now. So when I'm doing my leg days, it's like, oh my God, yes, I can hip thrust way more. Oh, my Bulgarians are going up. So all of my markers in the gym, like there's definitely a confluence of benefits that are happening there. So I think for women who are um I also, the one thing I'll say too, in transparency, we will often give like kind of freebies to our audience, and one of them is like a sprinting like cheat sheet or whatever, and that's like one of the number one, freebies that we've given out because everybody's like really like almost, I call it like sprinting curious, right? But they're
Yeah.
kind of like psychology, like, is this going to hurt? Am I going to get injured? Am I going to like tear an ab or something? So I think every woman should be sprinting to some capacity. I do like I'm a track girl, so I come from track, so I'm comfortable on the track, but that might not necessarily be everybody's comfort levels yet. I think that you can get on an assault bike. I think you can get on you can get on
A
a
rowing
ski
machine. Yeah.
rower, like anything that's like low. If you're worried about the impact, and like your form, which is a valid concern, I would say choose something that's low impact to start, build up your fitness that way. Just start with like 2 sprints. You just need 2, right? Actually, the data is pretty clear. If you like anywhere from 2 to 4 sprints, this is where we start to see testosterone and IGF-1 and like that hormonal, like that anabolic sort of cocktail that we want in midlife starts to increase. So just do two sprints and that's it. And then take a week off and then try it again next week. Maybe you go a little bit longer. You just do 2 sprints. Maybe you can go a little bit longer, or maybe you add in a third, so you can sort of play with it. But I think every woman should be doing that because if we are not training speed and strength, you lose it, right? It's like use it or lose it. And for speed in particular, I think that the data, I'll fact check myself. I'll make sure that I fact check. I think it's like 2 to 3% per year. If you're not training it, you can lose up to 2 to 3% per year. That is 20 to 30% per decade. That is not nothing,
is-
That is
no.
very significant.
No, I really
So-
like the image of being slow and frail. That's
Well,
super
the
sweet.
other thing too is, I mean, this is very minor, and of course, I'm such a fan of sprinting. But one of the workouts that we love to program is 15 seconds on, 90 seconds off, 8
Mhm.
times. And we are all really busy, and especially in this phase of life, we're raising kids and working, and it is, most of us don't have 2 hours to train, and so there's something really lovely and efficient about it as well. I mean, we usually pair it with other stuff, so that's not the sum total of a training block you'd see, but I mean, you could theoretically, add in 10, 15 minutes of sprinting once or twice a week, and it's not a big time. It's like we all have time to do that.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
max effort, we aren't actually, as you say, people would say, I'm not going to load 300 pounds on that bar. That's too heavy. But, they don't understand that we could have a similar experience by forcing the brain to work at the highest speed available to it.
Right.
And I think just the impacts on soft tissue and muscle recruitment, and even just, the psychology of I can move fast. And, I think one of the things that we always talk about a lot is, especially as rehab has kind of worked its way into fitness, right? We've seen a lot of rehabby exercises, busy work kind of permeate the gym. And what we have seen is those things never are done at speed. And they're, if turns out you see all the people getting injured in pickleball. I'm like, well, how did you go fast before you played pickleball? And they have never
Right.
gone fast.
Right.
So
How
I
did you
just
train lateral? How did you train in the
Right,
Hormonal
right.
plane?
Did
Did
you
you
ever
already
cut?
started?
you are
Did you ever
you are
do-
just
right.
Yeah.
preaching to the choir. I love that.
Yeah. So Dr. Stephanie, I feel like we could continue this on for another hour, but and it's so fun to talk to you. But what besides or in addition to your awesome program you just launched called Lift, what are you looking forward to? What are you seeing in our space that is lighting you up? Like what's going on there?
I mean, I think that the thing I'm most excited about is the messaging around muscle for women as we age. I still think, if I'm being totally honest, I still think we're failing, right? We're not quite
Yeah.
there
We have
yet.
a lot of work to do there. I
Yeah, we
agree.
still have a lot of work to do,
D
but I do.
plus.
Yeah, we're at a D plus. Yeah, and listen, I am like little miss over prepared. I want to get an A plus on my, I want a gold star on my chart. So we're gonna keep like you and I together are gonna continue working on getting this message out there in different programmatics, whether it's paid programs or even just some of the wonderful content that you put out on social media that I love to put out on social media. So I think I'm really excited about that. The other thing I gotta say I'm really excited about is is mobility and rehab. Like, I know you just mentioned it briefly there, but this is like biomechanics and bone. I mean, I'm just like, it's my first love. It's my first, like the way that human kinetics, I just love it so much. And the rehab part of it was always, I always struggled with it in practice because as soon as patients started, like we would remove the pain to like kind of subclinical, like stop doing the rehab, stop coming to their appointments, stop doing their stretches, stop doing all all the things. But I think that it's sort of maybe it's just my own hope, or it's maybe just like the box that I'm living in. But I do hope that it's going to start to become like really cool. Like it's going to become really cool to get like in the same way that muscles like super cool. I
Oh,
kind of
man.
want like
You
ligaments
you
and
are living.
tendons. Yeah.
This is total fantasy. No one.
Yeah.
We've tried to make stretching cool for 20 years. Take care
Yeah.
of your body.
Yeah.
I do. I know we're trying to wrap, but I do just want to say something that ties into what you just said. Is that most of the 40s and 50s, even the 30-year-olds that we work with, have some kind of pain. And part of what I think is amazing about the gym is it normalizes discomfort, and it's the place to begin to empower people to take care of their problems. It gives a framework, it gives agency. And really, we have never met someone who comes into our program who doesn't have an old injury or an old hot spot or something they have to keep an eye on. And one of the things you said about your program first was you said, hey, we're going to work on form and technique
Mechanics.
first.
Yeah.
Because that's how
Special.
we signal safety. And so much of the beliefs that people have around their bodies are, I don't do that because, back in Vietnam, it hurt one time and I learned and my doctor said, don't touch your knee, right? So, you are giving people permission to begin to exercise and realize they can do that safely. And that has to be a conversation about anyone in their later ages, I'll just say 40s and 50s on, because 30s maybe, but that we expect you to be in pain and we expect to train you to manage that and to signal to your brain that it's safe. And that is such a seminal part of your program. And I love that you're a clinician teaching people to lift weights. The provider coach is my favorite person on the earth.
Yeah, I think the more diversification of movement that you can have, in the same way that your financial portfolio might be diversified in a whole different, in
Right.
order for you to make maximum gains, it's the same, like that movement diversification, I think is really important because otherwise you'll probably notice that if you only are hardcore in one vertical of movement, you're going to hurt yourself and you are not going to, and your like your capacity for recovery from those injuries, I think starts to decline a little bit as we age. So I love
It's harder.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
this like
As Katie
movement.
Bowman says, we have to have a really diverse movement diet. So,
Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right.
Yeah, she's
Love it.
fantastic.
Tell us where
Yeah.
we
Where
could
can everybody find you, learn more?
give us the keys to the Lift program. Tell us where we can find you on the socials. Remind everyone about your fabulousness.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much. So, Dr. Stephanie Estima, you can find all of our programs and information there. You can find me on social. Again, Dr. Stephanie Estima on Instagram. I try to put out a lot of content there as well. And Lyft you can find Lyft if you go to drstephanieestima.com. So, if you want to join that, and we've tried to make it very, very affordable. So, very low barrier to entry. It's yours for life. You don't have to renew or anything like that. So, it's sort of my love letter to women in midlife.
Congratulations again. And Dr. Stephanie, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, it's just been a delight. Thank you so much.